Good morning, and it is indeed morning. Yummy. All right, so every family has their traditions, and during Easter time, one of our favorite things to make is morning glory gravy. It's a traditional Southern gravy made with bacon grease and hard-boiled eggs. So morning glory gravy, 3 parts. We're going to make biscuits. My mom has reached a point in her life where she uses canned biscuits, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. And it's a really easy and quick way to make biscuits. But for giggles, we are actually going to bake our own fresh biscuits. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to hard-boiled eggs. That is an extremely important skill to have. And then finally, we will make the gravy itself. As usual, we prep ourselves first, which includes protecting our clothing, keeping our hair out of the food, and washing our hands. Okay, next we wash our hands, and then we're going to go ahead and get started making the biscuits.
We need good hygiene to keep living. Lather up for 20 whole seconds, then you kill it. Gotta make time so the germs don't keep winning. We need good hygiene. Mama said to me every day, wash your hands and don't touch your face. Hand sanitizer, soap and hot water after everything. When you do anything.
Okay, so today we are going to make fluffy biscuits, and that is going to require all-purpose flour, shortening, 1 egg, sugar, baking powder, not to be confused with baking soda, and milk. There are some suggestions that are made by the cookbook, which includes stirring first the dry ingredients with a fork to evenly distribute the baking powder. One thing you always have to remember is not to over mix things, especially when it comes to the completed dough, otherwise it becomes tough. We are going to be cutting out the biscuits. When we're cutting out the biscuits, we are going to make sure that this is coated in flour so the dough doesn't stick to it. Alright, so step 1, we need to take all of our dry ingredients, which includes 2 cups of the flour, 2 teaspoons of the baking powder, 3 teaspoons of sugar, half of a teaspoon of salt. Pull the salt out yet. And then we'll work with the other ingredients. Alright, what happened to my salt? Okay, so we're going to start off. We have a small bowl to mix all of this in. We're going to get our cup and a knife to ensure that we properly measure out the flour. Alright, so we get the flour into the cup. We use the back end of a butter knife to scrape across the top. There's our first cup. It's quite alright if we get flour on the countertop because we are going to be putting flour on the countertop later in order to knead the dough. There's 2 cups of flour. I'm going to put this to the side because we are going to use the rest of that flour later as we are kneading the dough. Next, we need 2 teaspoons of baking powder. That's 2 teaspoons. Next, we're going to take 3 teaspoons of sugar. 1, 2, 3. And thoroughly mix the dry ingredients. Okay, now it's time for the shortening. We're going to take a spatula and we're going to scoop out the shortening. All we're doing with the shortening is we're scooping it into the half cup and packing it down. And I'm going to make sure that it's nice and flat, get rid of the excess shortening. Now, according to our recipe, it says cut in shortening until the mixture resembles coarse crumbs. Dave, do you know what it means when it says cut in? So when you cut in shortening or butter, you're using a pastry knife or a butter knife, or in our case, I think we're going to use a potato masher. That's a pastry. Okay. And hopefully I am going to cut in a picture of a pastry knife so you know what it looks like. All right, so we're going to use a potato masher instead. We're going to take little chunks and drop it in. And if you don't have a pastry knife or a potato masher, you can use 2 knives to literally cut. Potato masher seems to be working well. All right, so we are going to do this until the mixture looks like coarse crumbs, and I'm going to get my other camera so that you can see how this is indeed starting to look like coarse crumbs. Okay, next we're going to take the milk and we're going to beat an egg into the milk, and then we are slowly going to add the wet mixture into the dry mixture until we have ourselves a dough. All right, so we are going to take 2/3 cup of milk, which falls right here where I'm pointing. We'll go ahead and put the milk back so that it doesn't spoil. I'm going to take 1 egg, drop it in. All right, now we are going to combine the two, stirring the wet mixture into the dry mixture. All right, now we are going to combine the two, stirring the wet mixture into the dry mixture. I had to go ahead and set the oven to preheat. A cold oven. Cold ovens don't bake. And if it's not preheated, it won't bake evenly. Okay, so before I turn our dough out onto the surface, I'm going to perform a little bit of mise en place. I'm going to clean up my work area and sanitize it, especially since I usually like to put my flour into, once it's been opened, into a Ziploc bag in order to keep moisture out of it, and sometimes mice. Okay, we're back. We've performed our mise en place and we've cleaned our area, and we are ready to flour our work surface. We also want to flour our hands. Now we're going to take our moistened dough and we are going to plop it onto our floured surface. And we are going to knead the dough 20 times. Again, I am flouring my hands in order to keep the dough from sticking to them. When you knead dough, basically after you've turned the dough out onto the surface you're working on, and don't forget, you really need to be sure that you have floured that area. It's going to be sticky. What we're going to do is we're going to take the part that's furthest away from us, we're going to fold it in, and we're going to squish it down with our hands. We need to do this 20 times according to this recipe. So fold. What this is doing is it is strengthening the dough. You can tell this dough is getting nice and firm now. Okay, I honestly lost count. I think that's about 20 times. Feels nice and firm. Okay, next up we have to roll it out so that we can cut it. Okay, when you roll stuff out, you need a rolling pin. And this is a rolling pin. No, it's not something that you use to thump your kids when they're being bad. All right, so I am putting more flour on this. Roll, 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 roll. And we want it to be about 3/4 of an inch thick. Next up, we're going to take our form. Oh, before I do that, I actually need to grease the pan that we're going to use. So I'm going to wash it with my hands real quick, and we'll do that. Okay, don't forget, anytime that you use spray to grease something up, do it over the sink so that it doesn't get on the floor so you don't slip on it. So I think we're pretty much done with our cookbook. We are going to be, after we get these cut and placed on here, we're going to let that bake at 450 degrees in the oven for 8 to 10 minutes. All right, so we've got our floured, form. I'm going to press down with a quick wiggle. There we go. There we go. Close enough for government work. All right, here we go. All right, so we set those on the center rack, and we are going to go ahead and put a timer on for 8 minutes to remind us to check on those.
Those are actually really good looking biscuits. They might be ready to come out.
Okay, next up are the hard-boiled eggs. Okay, so we are going to take this pan, we are going to fill it with cold water. We want to have enough cold water in here to have an inch or two of water over the eggs. I'm going to transfer this over here. I'm going to go ahead and place a lid over it because that will help it boil faster. Then we're going to go ahead and set this all the way on high.
So we're adding salt to the water to add flavor, which is absorbed by the food, and it also raises the boiling point of the water.
Rolling boil. We are going to turn this off, set the timer for 10 minutes. Okay, so fortunately the oven top that we're using does retain heat, which is why it's going to continue to cook the eggs to perfect hard boiledness. If you do not have a stove top that will retain heat, then you might want to keep the temperature on very low or simmer. Okay, our hard-boiled eggs should be done, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and remove them from the heat source. We're going to drain them, and we are going to go ahead and peel them. There are two things we're going to do. We're going to separate the whites from the yolks. We're going to crumble up the yolk and put that to the side, and we're going to cut up the whites to add to the gravy. Best way to cut bacon, or open bacon.
Cook the bacon on high heat, so we have clicked on high and start.
As you can see, we've got a really nice bit of bacon fat in there that for the base for our roux. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and remove the bacon, and I'm going to place it on this paper towel so I can pat out some of the grease that we don't need because we have plenty of grease left. All right, I'm going to turn the heat down since we are going to be making our gravy now. Adding the flour in. I'm going to go ahead and add a little bit of milk. And this is why I turned it down, because we don't want this popping up and burning us. You don't have to use flour, you can use cornstarch. As you can see, it's still way too thick, so we are going to add more milk. And again, you are just adding flour and milk. If I thin out too much, all I have to do is add more flour until you get the consistency that you want. With gravy, you don't want it too thick and you don't want it too thin. So the whisk is definitely helping get it smoothed out. Again, this is going to be entirely up to you eyeballing it. Right now, it's definitely way too thick, so I need to add plenty more milk. I'm going to whisk it a bit so that we can get it nice and smooth. I'm going to go ahead and put it on low. Grab a tasting spoon. See how we're coming along here. It's pretty good gravy, but the milk has cooled it down a bit, so I've turned it back up. Next up, I'm going to take the bacon. We will add the bacon back into the pan. But we're not done with the gravy yet. My mama said to start off with about a 1/4 cup of flour. Now, since this is all nice and vague, I'm just going to scoop it out. I'm not going to bother properly measuring it. I am, however, going to get a spoon. All right, so, there are plenty of different ways of peeling an egg. The way that I find works best for me is to take the fat end of the egg, pop it, and then roll it. And then we should be able to fairly easily peel the egg. Now, what I want to show you is how well this should have ended up cooking. When I slice it in half, ta-da! Now we're going to remove the yolk. We're going to be crumbling that up to use as a topper. We're going to slice up whites. We are going to add them into our gravy. Sometimes the eggs peel extremely easily, sometimes not so much. Now I'm going to put a biscuit together and enjoy my breakfast. Okay, so to finish off the process, we take one of our biscuits, pull it apart, scoop out the gravy, and take some of the yolk, sprinkle it on top, and voila! There you have it, goldenrod eggs. Okay, so just so you know, we did add salt and pepper after it was taste tested off screen, okay? And now, Graham, yes, it's eggs. There you go. All right. What do you think? Hot? Dork. No. What do you think? Yummy?
Good job. We cook the eggs.
Daddy thinks we should do it with sausage next time. Okay, besides salt and pepper, it was also suggested that instead of going through the trouble that we went with making those biscuits, just use Bisquick. Even the professionals do it.